do you stop using credit cards? Do you stop using a bank? I mean, social media has become the norm, and the biggest platform is Facebook. I don't think it's worth abandoning it unless something really egregious continues to happen. I mean, if there's, I mean, they used it for a purpose, and now it's a different thing altogether.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I don't know. For me personally, I've never, I won't say never. There was a point in time where I was active relatively on Facebook and posting and looking at things, but it seems like most of my family has become more and more engaged with it, and they use it as a communication to talk to each other, and I just don't want to for a variety of reasons. So I end up missing all kinds of things, and then people get mad at me. Well, you didn't know I got a promotion, and I'm like, well, I wasn't on Facebook to see it. Why don't you tell me you got a promotion? You know. So I don't know. Doug, what about you, man? Are you like both of you guys? And this is an open discussion. Is Facebook dead to photographers, or should photographers be doubling down on it? I mean, I forget what the size of Facebook's audience is, but it's gigantic, and you can't ignore it.
It starts with a B. I know that.
It starts with a B, but then there's also Instagram. Should the party be moving over to Instagram, or should it just stay, you know, with the masses on Facebook? What do you guys think?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Maybe it's the age and the gray hair, because as they say, Facebook is now a platform for your parents or your grandparents. Well, that's me. I'm a parent and
a grandparent.
Me. And a grandparent, right? So, you know, like Shiv, this actually is the primary way I communicate with my family and many of my closest friends, and so I'm not going to abandon it. But let me say a couple of things about what's happened in the last few weeks here. You know, a lot of the platforms, we make certain assumptions. We don't read the fine print. We don't read those agreements, but we assume, because we see things like, you know, if you go to Amazon and you search for a product, it immediately shows up being pushed to you on Facebook, right? Mm-hmm. So we make certain assumptions that Facebook is linking our identities with these third parties. But what I assumed was that it was done somewhat anonymously. That, yes, they said, here's this person and blah, blah, but they didn't give my personal identifying information to a vendor. They didn't tell Amazon, this is Doug K and he lives at this address and this is his email and his phone number.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we know that they do, that they take all that personal information out. The thing that really crossed the line for me came out actually today, or maybe it was yesterday. And that is that they're actually giving the text of private messages to third parties.
Oh, I didn't hear that. What?
Yeah. Yeah. If you use Facebook Messenger and you send a message to me, a private message, a PM, it goes to the vendors. So people like Cambridge Analytica has the text of my private messages. To me, there is no justification whatsoever for that. Now, you know, I've never liked Facebook. I've never liked Zuckerberg. I don't like the business model of the company, but it's like the old, if this is showing our age, remember the old Listerine commercials? I hate it, but I use it twice a day.
Yes.
Remember that? Right?
I don't remember
I hate Facebook and I use it more than twice a day. Okay. Yeah. But, so I'm going to continue to use it. If it wasn't such a relatively important part of my social life, I would get off it, because I find their practices, their business model offensive. And I see no excuse for them sharing private messages. And I hope that, you know, they signed a consent decree years ago about protecting privacy. To my mind, they have done none of that. And I hope that they get fined a tremendous amount for doing that. And if the fines put them out of business, I'm not really going to miss them.
Yeah. So you're saying, Doug, you are using them daily, though, still?
I am using them daily. I'm going to continue to use them daily. If they disappear, bye-bye. It was nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
well, I mean, you know, you had companies. What's the other one? That prior to Facebook, that was, you know,
there was Facebook. There was MySpace before that.
MySpace,
and Friendster.
And, you know, they came. We used them, and they're gone. You know, I mean, Google Hangouts was a good thing. We did. You know, but now even Frederick, you're not using Google Hangouts, right? No, so, I mean, these are fads. They come and go. But, you know, Facebook has become gigantic. I mean, the B word, yes, billions. That's okay. I think we as intelligent people also need to be cautious of what we put out on the web, and what kind of information we're willing to just pass on to somebody like Facebook. I mean, your name, okay, but are you going to put your credit card in there? Are you going to put your social security number in there? Are you going to put your date of birth in there? Yes, date of birth, a lot of people do. And they get happy birthdays from everybody. People they don't even know wish them happy birthdays.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can be a little careful in what you put out and what you're subjecting yourself to.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's so much stuff going on, and it was already difficult to keep track of all this stuff, right? It's like, and then you're like, you have this love-hate. Like me personally, I have the love-hate relationship with Facebook. Like, I don't want to use it. I know what's going on in the background. I mean, most of us tech-savvy people that live in Silicon Valley and on the coasts, we understand that you are the product. If something is free, you are the product,
Yep.
right? It's kind of like I was sitting around earlier. You guys remember The Matrix? You remember
Yeah, sure.
The Matrix 1? You remember the scene in The Matrix 1 when Morpheus releases Neo from the real world and he wakes up in that pod and he looks around and there's all these other people in the pods and they're using them as batteries? That's Facebook right there. You're in the pod and there's harvesting your natural byproduct, your messaging and your posts and photos and all that stuff to sell ads against. And I understand that fundamentally, but at the same time, Facebook's the machine that is Facebook is winning in a lot of ways because they know they've made it ridiculously super glue sticky for you to get away from it, right? Because your friends and family and everyone you knew from high school and college and military, everyone's on there. And if you remove yourself from that, you're basically ostracizing yourself. So, which may not be a bad thing. Some people we're not meant to see again. I'm just saying.
Well, that might be a good thing.
Yeah, it might be a good thing. All right, guys, I want to remind the chat room that we're in the middle of the show now. I started the stream a little bit late. Apologies for that. But I want to remind you guys, we haven't got to the Q&A segment yet or the feature discussion. So if you have a question that you'd like to pose to us for the Q&A segment, please do that in the chat right now for the on the YouTube video. The TWiP community manager, Chris Berry, is in there holding it down and will collate your questions and throw them into the Google Doc that myself, Doug, and Shiv are looking at as we do the show. So with that, let's move on to our feature segment, guys. So the feature segment here is about what is the perfect camera? Like, what camera should I buy is the question that we all get, especially from new people that are just jumping in. They're getting excited about photography. It's always, okay, what's the best camera? And my response, and I'm curious to hear both of your responses, but my response is to respond with questions. Like, okay, what are you shooting? Like your genre, what kind of stuff do you want to shoot? How much money do you have? And are your friends into photography? And if so, what are they shooting? Because if you're getting an interchangeable lens camera, then you could potentially borrow lenses from them until you figure out what you're going to buy. Shiv Verma, let's start with you, man. Like, when people ask you the question, what's your knee-jerk reaction?
I don't know if I have a knee-jerk reaction.
You don't? You just walk away?
Yeah, I mean, okay. Cameras serve a purpose, right? And you finally get down to what is it that you're using and why is it that you're using it? We've done this on the show before, and when I've switched from what I was using before to what I'm using now, there was more than one reason for doing it. I mean, one of it was, I'm getting older. I can't carry so much. So I'm looking for something that's definitely going to be more convenient. It's lighter. It'll be, still have the same reach because I'm a nature wildlife photographer. Mm-hmm. I'm going to look for long lenses. Will I have all of that capability? And then on the other side is, what else do I really need? I mean, do I need something that's going to give me 60 by 40 inch images, or am I going to be working with social media? Am I going to be sharing images on the screen? What am I printing for? And even if I'm printing for competitive purposes like I used to, how big do I need to go? And so what will satisfy all of those needs? And really, it comes down to a product selection based upon who you are and what you like to do.
Yeah.
I do product photography, right? I mean, I have a need for very high resolution images. And there was a time when a Micro Four Thirds camera couldn't do it, but now it can. I mean, I can produce 80 megapixel images without any problem. So if my customer is looking for a high resolution image, today I can deliver it to him. So we've narrowed it down to a product line that fulfills all of my needs. Now, it may not fulfill Doug's needs, it may not fulfill your needs, but it fulfills my needs. So I'm using Micro Four Thirds very comfortably. I do not shy away from a job now because I don't have to turn around and say, but you know what, I won't be using this camera, I'll use something else. Maybe I'll rent something because you need a 100 megapixel file. There's no client that's going to complain about an 80 megapixel file, that's for sure. Yeah. So, that's where I am.
Yeah, Doug, what about you? Like, if someone throws that question at you, which I'm sure they do, especially doing that podcast with Gordon, I'm sure you're position. Both of you have positioned yourselves, rightly so, as the experts, right? So when someone says, about every camera out there, Doug K, which one should I spend my money on? What do you say?
And you remember this from the days when we used to do all about the gear. My answer is the best camera is the one that comes out right after you buy one.
It
right?
is.
And no one's ever disagreed with me.
Chris Berry's in the chat room. Christopher Berry's in the chat room, and he just bought a Sony a7 III. It just got delivered today. So, Chris, listen to Uncle Doug. The best camera is the one that comes out right after you crack that box open.
That's right. Although his timing's pretty good, I must say. That's not a bad decision.
Yeah.
And it's interesting listening to Shiv because what Shiv and I shoot are almost exactly the opposite. I don't want high resolution. I shoot street photography and I shoot events. Events being everything from parades, but also sports. I shoot sports. I shoot dance. I shoot a lot of dance in the last couple of years. So I'm looking for low light. I'm looking for good autofocus. I'm looking for a certain amount of portability. As an example, I had an A7R Mark II, and the A7R Mark III came out. So for people who don't know, these are 42 megapixel cameras.
Yeah. Beasts.
Well, I will go and I shot a dance rehearsal yesterday, and I shot over 4,200 images in a few hours. Well, if you have 42 megapixel files, that is a very painful experience.
Yeah.
So I purposely did not buy the A7R Mark III. I have an A9 instead, which is a spectacular camera.
Yeah.
And it has a nice 24 megapixel image, which is plenty big for everything I do.
Yeah.
But
do you guide people to that? Because that's the other thing. That's the other thing. So that's a good point. So both of you brought up, you have different needs and tastes for your kind of the things that you do, right? So and our personal experiences weigh heavily on our recommendations to people, right? As they should. But when someone comes to you, especially if all three of us know more about the camera industry than I would say the average consumer. And if someone comes to you or comes to us and says, "Hey, I want to buy a camera," are we biased towards what we already use for whatever reasons, because we have Stockholm syndrome or for some other reasons?
Well, let me say that
if they say, my genre is going to be shooting black cats in dark rooms, I'm probably not going to guide them to the stuff that I use, right?
Right. So. Well, I mean, as a professional camera reviewer, I have to be more objective than that. I can't, we're talking about the G9, for example. G9 is not a camera I would ever own, but it's a great camera.
What's the matter with
you?
So
I have to be much more objective than simply look at the things that I would use. But Shiv had the exact right questions. First of all, what do you shoot? Yeah. Give us an idea, because that's going to make more difference than anything. Do you, as Shiv said, do you print? If so, how large? How large an image do you need to make? What lenses have you used, or if you don't know, what are you, help me figure out what kind of lens, what focal lengths you need, prime versus zoom, and so forth. And finally, an important question is, do you do much post-processing? For example, do you want to do a lot of cropping? That's a big one, right?
Yeah.
If you, maybe for some people, the 42 megapixel sensor is great because they want to crop a lot, and that can make a difference. I have a bunch of notes here. I don't know that we have to get to them, but there was a thing years ago, like, what's the best car? Well, what's the best something like, let's see, you want English food, Italian reliability, right? All the things that could go wrong. But, if you look at the individual vendors, they have their strengths and weaknesses too. I mean, I think you both agree that Panasonic is very strong in video.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say that?
Yeah. Panasonic is very strong in video.
Yeah. Olympus is great in image stabilization.
Well. Yeah, but Panasonic is moving, with, like you mentioned, the G9, they're moving unapologetically, as I said in my little review video, to still photography, or not an or, an and. So they're adding the G9 as an addition to the line, so that still photographers, it's a camera that's built for us. But and I think that goes to the right tool for the right job, because it depends on what you're shooting. What is your genre? Like I said, if you're shooting black cats at midnight, you need a camera that can resolve, data like that. SHIV VERMA, what do you add to that?
Yeah, I think you Doug said it right, and you're saying it. I mean, I really believe that for me to give somebody advice on what they should buy once they've answered all the questions, clearly there are winners, and then there are going to be some losers. If you're a pro and your sole purpose in life is to make large prints, or you're going to satisfy a magazine requirement or whatever it is, then neither what Doug uses nor what I use nor what you use is going to be okay. You're going to have to buy a Hasselblad, or you're going to buy a Phase 1. I mean, that's a given. Yeah. But if you're a nature wildlife shooter like myself, the Panasonic line is just perfect. If you're into hybrid kind of photography, you're going to combine, video and stills, then again, Panasonic is definitely the product of choice. But here again, you get into the next situation, like Doug mentioned. If I want to do street photography, any camera will do. Mm-hmm. But if I want to do street photography at night, now I have another element of that equation that I need to fill, and that says the camera better be good in low light. And so what did Doug choose? Doug didn't get the A7R III. He got a camera that's good for low light performance, because that's what he shoots. So we have, fortunately, a variety of products that we can select from. And from an advisory point of view, we can give people the choice that fits their needs.
Does the choice ever become... There's two things that popped up, because there's a really good thread going on in the chat room right now. Trevor Panaki says, are manufacturers innovating too quickly, right? So, and he goes on to say he's never outgrown a camera, but he's changed a lot of cameras, right? So which makes a lot of sense. And I would say the same thing. I have quite a few cameras here in the house, and I can say without any hesitation that I have not mastered any of them, to knowing all the little features and the details and all the little nuances that each body can do. I never get into that, because it always goes back to f-stop, shutter speeds, and ISO, So, but yet camera manufacturers are innovating so quickly and marketing the blitzkrieg style. We feel like, and the marketers are great, because we feel like, oh, I have to have that, or I'm somehow inadequate. I don't know. You can tell. What do you think about that sort of mindset?
Well, I mean, Doug, why don't you respond, because I have some thoughts on that, which I will.
Doug, he wants you to go first so he can land what you
I'm used to talking before I formulated my opinions clearly.
You have a career in politics.
That's right. The question, one of the questions that Trevor mentioned was about outgrowing a camera. Is that what you're talking about, that issue? Mm-hmm. I think I don't think, I think you can outgrow a camera. I mean, you can get to the point where your camera isn't doing what you want. A clear example would be people who need a certain amount of image stabilization. And before we had image stabilization in some of our cameras, you say, boy, I wish I had that. And that came out and that was very helpful. I was shooting, again, 4,200 pictures at a dance rehearsal yesterday. And I was thinking, imagine if I had to do this on film and I had 36 exposures on a roll. How would I do that? It would be, I would approach the problem in a very different way. And so you use the camera that you have and you adapt to its strengths and its weaknesses to get the job done. That's always been the case.
Yeah.
But are camera manufacturers coming out with things too quickly? No. I think, I was looking back at the camera that I had 10 years ago, and it's amazing. It's amazing how much things have improved in 10 years. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want them to slow down a bit. Does it make my life more difficult? Yes, it does in terms of buying cameras, and it keeps us very busy at cameralabs.com and reviewing cameras. That's for sure.
Yeah. And it depends on your propensity for gear acquisition syndrome too, right, Doug?
Say it again?
Gear acquisition syndrome. If you've got that, then you're completely.
I mean, I got into the camera review business because I couldn't afford to buy more cameras, and I wanted to use every new camera that came out. And I said, well, how can I do that without buying them? And I said, aha, I'll do camera reviews. And that worked for a while until I got to the point where, as you remember, Frederick, I got frustrated because I had a new camera every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I think everyone would agree with me. You cannot become proficient with a camera in 2 weeks.
It was like your personal hell, right? Because you're like, I want all these cameras, and now I have all the cameras, but I have no time to use them, right?
So now I work with Gordon Lang, and Gordon does the heavy lifting, and I show up to help him record the videos. So anyway, I'm not sure what the primary. We've had so many good questions here. Can I answer one that came up? I just see that has come up in the list. How many megapixels do you really need? Likewise, Trevor asked about the A7 Mark III versus the A7R Mark III.
Yeah.
For me, 24 megapixels is just fine. And the only difference between the A7 III and the A7R III is the frame rate, because the A7R, the A7R3 is about the same. The difference is the sensor size, the number of megapixels is 24 versus 42.
The frame rate on the 9 is much more.
The name frame on 9, I can shoot 20 frames a second on my 9. And I think it's about 10 or 11, if I'm correct, on the others. But the A7 Mark III at $2,000 is a terrific camera.
What about so to continue the question on the what camera should I buy to answer that? Have you ever said why what phone are you shooting with? Are you shooting with an iPhone or a late model Android phone? Why don't you just use that until you feel like that this whole photography bug has stuck? Right? Should you, in other words, should you recommend people go out and buy hardware because someone told them that they take good pictures? Or should you say, okay, why don't you push it and see how far you can go to push yourself into whatever your chosen genre is with a phone camera, which is highly capable anyway. And then if you feel like you hit your head against the ceiling with your mobile phone, then consider buying new glass. What would you guys say to that?
Well, I'll say this about an iPhone, for example. If you're shooting in good light and you're happy with the equivalent of a 28 millimeter or a 50 millimeter, your iPhone is fine. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get much better. Unless you need to make large prints, because you're looking at, what is the iPhone? I think it's 12 megapixel mm-hmm. or something like that. But if you need longer focal length, if you need low light, if you need to print larger than the iPhone, you need to go beyond the iPhone. Is that pretty much right, Shiv?
Yeah, and I think also frame rates.
Frame rates, yes, that's true.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just going to step back just a little bit, because I think Trevor's question is kind of interesting. Innovation comes from two things. Innovation really comes from user requests. We feel that something is lacking, something is missing, and we make noise about it, and then the manufacturer picks up on that, and then they work on developing to satisfy a need which you have expressed. And I think that's a very good thing. And Panasonic and Sony both have demonstrated with the exception of the menu system in the Sony cameras, that you just don't seem to understand that English is English. And when we say we don't understand the menu system, we don't understand the menu system. It's become better, but not good enough. But every camera that comes out basically is fulfilling a need that has been expressed by the user community. And I think that kind of innovation is really good for all of us. Where we end up with at times is, I wish it could do this, or I wish it could do this better. And at times you reach that limit, and the limit cannot be sort of overcome without another camera coming out, because firmware just won't do it. So I'm glad that innovation is as rapid as it is. But that doesn't mean you have to go and buy the next camera just because it has a feature that you may never use.
Easier said than done, Shiv.
Well, I mean, but Frederick, that's the gas. That's the gear acquisition issue that we have to sometimes.
But the match on that gas, the match on the gear acquisition syndrome, is the insanely good marketing by camera companies to make us like Sharky James in the chat says FOMO, fear of missing out, right? Yeah, they needle that nerve and say, hey, you know what? You're going to miss out on this camera because it can shoot, it can do these things, it can do backflips. It's okay if you want to be mediocre, but if you really want to be good, buy our camera, right? Which is fine. It's marketing, and the marketing keeps the engine going, and it keeps the companies in business. But if you're just getting in, I'm wondering, how do you what's the best way to guide people, to not so much, even if you abstract out the platform, it's not Lumix, it's not Sony, it's not Nikon, Canon. If you abstract that out, how do you get to the nugget of why do you need a camera, and can you use something more pedestrian before you dive in? I think even camera manufacturers could help answer this question. I mean, it's it would be hard for them to not recommend their own thing. But if they were to take a more sort of, Switzerland approach to it and just say, okay, our camera's not for everyone, but these are the other brands that might fit you if you are trying to do this kind of thing. Do we ever see a day when that might happen?
Well, it's already there. I mean, neither Panasonic nor Olympus, that are Micro Four Thirds, claim to have a large sensor like Sony does. Yep. Right. Sony is sensor dominant. I mean, there's nobody who makes a sensor better than Sony does. I think even medium format cameras,
we bow down to Sony sensors for sure. Yeah.
But if you don't need it, then that's not the camera for you, right? Mm-hmm. You look at Micro Four Thirds, right? People were talking about, Micro Four Thirds. I mean, that's just such a small sensor. It's 1/4 the size of full frame. Yeah, but does it do something that you want? Yes, and then get it. If it doesn't, then go buy something else. Yeah, but you think about Sony. What did they do? They came out with the A7R, and then there was this need for a low light, high performance, low light camera. So they came out with the A7S. I mean, a killer camera. And then there was this whole issue about, it's not fast enough, it's not good for sports, it can't do this, it can't do that. So they come out with the A9. Well, Panasonic did something similar. I mean, the GH5 is an absolutely phenomenal hybrid camera. I mean, it can take great, photos, and it can take excellent video, but not fast enough. Yeah. So they come out with the G9, and that satisfies the photographer. Oh, low light performance, come out with the GH5S. So now you've satisfied the need of two different genres of photography. I mean, I don't call it videography a genre as such, but that's what's happening. And then there'll be enhancements and improvements in each of these. Yeah. And I think that from a photographer's point of view, that is what we want.
Yeah. Should the photographers, how should video play into this? Because we know, like you said, Shiv, you're on one of your upcoming adventures is going to be mostly video, right? So yeah, should photographers, when making that initial decision or the initial purchase decision, let's say they've made the decision to jump into a semi-professional or professional level camera, how much should video weigh into it? Even if they're not, even if that's not their chosen genre at the moment. Like they say, you know, I want to go into street photography. I want to be a street photographer. Ultimately, they're going to probably want to do some video. Doug, why don't you go with first on this? How do you guide those people that, you know, that may not be initially moving into video, but may ultimately move into video?
Well, that's a good question. Video is a rather unique aspect of these, because what I was going to say before you asked me that question, I'll get back to that, was unless you're at the edges, and I'll talk about that, unless you're at the edges, any camera released in the last 2 years will probably do what you want. And I say Sony, Canon, Fuji, Nikon, Panasonic, Olympus. Who did I leave out? I think I didn't leave out anybody.
Yeah.
Pentax, even Pentax. That's
Yashica,
right.
Yashica. Don't forget Yashica.
Yeah, well, yeah, and my Rolleiflex back there too. But unless you have something that hits the extremes, like you need low light, you need rapid frame rate, you need something that's outside the bounds of the middle, the normal thing, then it really doesn't matter very much, right? Because they're all really good cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you need high frame rate, you might want to go to a Sony A9. If you're going to do a lot of video, I might recommend one of the Panasonic cameras. If you want to shoot JPEGs, and I might say, you know, I want the best possible JPEGs, I might say, go to Fuji. So there are all sorts of things that these cameras excel at, but they're at the edges. And that's where you get certain differences. If you're not at the edges, if you're a person who's asking me what camera should I buy, and that's all you tell me, then I can almost say, get whatever you can afford and don't worry about the brand.
Right.
Because they're all really, really good cameras.
There are no bad cameras out there. They're all good cameras, just that some can do things better than the others.
Yeah. I mean, it's like operating systems. Remember back in the day, it was Apple versus Windows, and Windows was clearly inferior, you know, of course, especially if you were an Apple head. And now these days, that's not the case. You know, it is.
Don't get me started.
There's parity. I'm going to say it. There's parity between I use Mac, but I know Windows has come a long way from the days of Control Alt Delete every 5 seconds, right? now I would argue I'm seeing cracks in the seams on my Mac, right? So, you know, it's the fit and finish that was there 10 years ago is probably still there, but not as good as it should be. And there's some other players out there that are doing, quote, Apple quality hardware and software. Doug, what do you think? I mean, I know you got something to say about that. What?
Well, I mean, you may remember that my iMac and your iMac are about a week apart. We both got our iMacs at the same time.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember that.
And they're starting to show their age a little bit.
Yeah,
that's true. Especially when you try to run Lightroom with huge numbers of files. But
bones are cracking a little bit.
What's the question?
That's awesome. See, that's what my Mac does all the time.
Let me have some more beer here.
My Mac does that exact same thing. I was asking you. It was an aside. You know, you seemed like you had an opinion on Mac versus Windows.
Oh yeah. Just I'm a Mac guy, but frustrated. A frustrated Mac user just because Apple and Mac just aren't what they used to be. So
yeah.
Don't get me started on that.
A lot of things aren't what they used to be, man. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the thing. I think, you know, if someone can tell me a specific requirement, I can help them identify a camera. If they tell me I want to shoot birds, that's a big clue. I get a lot of ideas in. If they say I want to shoot street, I want to shoot sports, I want to shoot low light, I want to shoot this or that, I can help them with that. If they say what camera I should buy, I'm sorry, it's just not enough information. Yeah. There's more to it than that.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why we do the reviews. We try and help people separate what's what. However, to be honest, most of the times we review a camera, we're reviewing that, the general use of it. You know, what's the image quality like? What's it feel like? You know, the reviews that I do are primarily what's it like to use this camera? And that's something that does vary a great deal. There's a huge difference between using a Sony camera with the world's worst menu system and something like, you know, like a Q which has almost no menu at all, and it works great.
Right.
So, Fuji cameras, nice controls if you like that style. Olympus, Panasonic, also great control. So there are lots of things to be offended by in all of these cameras.
Yes. I mean, you hit it on the head too, because the answer to this overall question is there is no answer. It's all subjective, right? So, someone in the chat room mentioned rent. You should date your cameras before you marry them. Why you just rent for a while?
I always recommend that. I recommend at the very least, if you have a good old fashioned local camera store, go there, hold them, play with them in the store. And if you're at all smart, you'll buy it from that store, because we need to keep these local camera stores in business.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Otherwise, your opportunity for trying it out is gone.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it's an unanswerable question, but it's fun. It's fun to talk about this stuff because there's so much going on in the space. Everything's always changing, and all the answers to the questions change. Like I put in the notes here, some of the decision factors are size, price, genre, and your peers. Should you go micro four thirds, full frame, APS-C? Right? Are you shooting video? Are you going to be photocentric? Do you care about higher megapixels, or do you care more about low light? And then the lenses and the ecosystem. What lenses are available for your camera? These are all the questions, or the thing. If I was buying a new camera, I was buying a new camera system. These are some of the things that I would want answered. Now, Doug, so cameralabs.com, where you and Gordon Lang do reviews. That's a place where I point people all the time to when they ask questions about particular cameras, because you guys do. They need a new word for exhaustive. Let's say if you want to be an expert on a particular camera, go to cameralabs.com, and chances are the reviews have already been done on that camera. It's kind of like a video version of a DP review. That's what it feels like. So,
well, the one complaint that we get is, because we have video reviews, but we also have Gordon's full length written reviews.
Yeah.
And the only complaint we get repeatedly is, oh, the written reviews have too much. Gordon he'll do he does like an 8,000 word review sometimes. I mean,
I don't know where the man finds the time.
But
where does he find the time?
Everything you ever wanted to know is there. That's for sure.
Like in excruciating, this is how many microns between pixels on the sensor on this particular body if you hold it standing on 1 foot,
Well, come on, that's a basic stat.
Yeah, that's basic. Yeah, that's not fringe at all. No, but it's good. It's a definite resource. So keep going.
It's a great resource. Only very soon you're going to require a whole set of artificial intelligence to decipher and be able to pick the perfect camera.
There you go. You could use Gordon's site. You use cameralabs.com as a data source, right? So
I'll give you a tip about cameralabs.com though. First of all, if you're going to watch the videos, do it with a glass of wine or beer, because they're all an hour long. The second is skip to the verdict, the last tab, because in the verdict, what we will always do is compare a camera to similar cameras. So if you're thinking of a Nikon, a D850 or something like that, we will list there the comparable cameras and the relative strengths and weaknesses. So that's probably the most valuable part of those reviews.
I love it. All right, guys, we're going to leave this segment. Any parting thoughts on the perfect camera?
Oh, yeah.
Go for it, too.
If you want a really high frame rate camera, wait for my pick.
Oh, thank you for that hook. What do they call that? Foreshadowing? Thanks for the foreshadowing. Perfect. All right, Doug,
I know what he's going to pick, and he's right. But I won't even say why. I'm going to save that because I don't want to spoil his pick.
Cool. Well, I hope we shed some light.
Doug, I'll let you certify my pick.
Okay, and I will do that.
All right, I hope we shed some light on what camera should I buy. It's a slippery pig. It's not an easy topic to cover, but we've given you some resources and some things to do and some things to think about when you start considering buying a new camera or moving into a new camera system. So, but now it is time for our Picks of the Week segment. This is the segment where you guys can recommend something to the TWiP audience, as long as it's somehow related to photography. Doug K, I'm going to let you go first, man. What's your pick of the week?
Okay. My pick of the week, actually, I'm going to mix it up a little bit because I had a couple of choices here. This is see this lollipop thing?
Yeah.
Sensor cleaner.
Yeah. Did you ever seen this? You see, he knows. I have been through everything imaginable in terms of cleaning sensors. I've been with Arctic butterflies and Eclipse fluids and swabs and blowers and everything. And I even teach a class in cleaning sensors because cleaning sensors freaks people out. But I clean my sensor certainly for every trip that I make. If you just have a little bit of dust on your sensor, a blower will get most of it off. If you have some really serious gunk on your sensor, you need to use Eclipse fluid or some other mild, appropriate solvent to get that stuff off. But most of the time on our sensors, we get dust. And if the in-camera shaking thing that you can control in your camera doesn't shake it off and the blower doesn't get it off, what do you do? So this is made by Pentax, and it's only like $45. I mean, how can you spend $45 on this? What this is a pad of sticky pages. And then you've got this little wand, and this wand has this little lollipop thing has essentially a sticky end to it. And you take this thing and you put it on the paper so that it picks up some stickiness. And then you put this on your sensor and it picks up the dust and you take it off and you get a new clean piece and you do this. So you're basically picking the dust off your sensor with a sticky lollipop thing.
That's a little scary, Doug.
It's scary, but I'll tell you, it's great. It is great for dust that won't blow off. And when you get a situation where it's not so severe that you have to go in with a swab and solvent. So it'll be in the show notes. Look for it. It's called the Pentax Image Sensor Cleaning Kit. What is it? O-ICK1. And it's only like $45 or something, which for what you can spend on sensor cleaning stuff, believe me, you can spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So that's my pick. Shiv, have you used one of these, Shiv?
Yes. Actually, it's they're quite good, except for sensors that are, really sort of stabilized and tend to shake a lot. So you want to make sure that you turn your camera on and put it into sensor cleaning mode so that the sensor locks in place.
Yeah, because otherwise you go in it, the thing just moves around too much.
And you can probably end up then scratching the sensor. So make sure that the sensor is locked in place before you use it.
Now you're gonna scare all those people away from cleaning their own sensors.
They'll go to
the camera shop for $50 or $60 to get their sensor cleaned, which is ridiculous.
It's like insurance though, because I have this fear. I don't even like changing lenses. I just have this fear. As soon as I take the lens off my camera, all these demons rush into the camera body to mess up my sensor. So, maybe I'll try that, Doug. I mean, it's $40, right? $45.
45, 49, something like that. It's the cheapest thing out there for cleaning sensors. Again, for more than dust that you can't just blow off or shake off.
And if you mess up your sensor, just contact Doug K and you replace your sensor for you.
So do they have a part number or a SKU number for the pad so you can buy more paper, or you have to buy a new wand and paper each time?
That's a good question. I've never gotten through more than my first set of papers. No,
because I think Frederick's going to need more than one pad.
I am. Yeah. No, I think I'll stick to just sending my camera away to get the sensor clean for now. Maybe that would be great. I mean, like I could see, like both of you guys travel a lot, right? I could see if you are in some location and it's dusty and your sensor picked up some dust and you're in your room at night, you're in your hotel room and kind of going through your gear and charging batteries and all that. That would be the time where I would pull that out of my first aid kit for the camera and get it ready for the next day. But if I'm at home like this, then I probably just take it to a camera store and let them do it. I don't know. That's just me, because I'm, like I said, every time I open, I think this is from, there's some trauma that I had in the military or something when dirt got in my camera, because I'm uber careful when I take the lenses off of my cameras. And I don't even want to look at the sensor too hard because I feel like something's going to happen to it. SHIV VERMA, man. What's your pick of the week this week?
So my pick of the week, actually, it's a series. I call this a series pick.
Cool.
So it's a camera,
Yes.
it's a lens, and it's some extenders.
Oh.
So the camera is the G9, the
Oh.
Panasonic Lumix G9.
I'm gonna bring that up on the screen right now while you're talking. Let's see.
Which is a camera that I've absolutely sort of fallen in love with. Don't go anywhere without it, and it is just exceptional. I mean, from a nature wildlife point of view, a camera that can shoot 60 frames, can do RAW, and do pre-burst. So if people want to really understand a lot of that capability, then go watch another YouTube show that I did. It's actually on Adorama TV, and you can see it there on the G9. So that's the camera. And then what I do have with me is this, which is the Panasonic Leica 200 millimeter f2.8 prime lens. And people say, well, 200 millimeters, so that you only get 400. Yes, you get 400 with this as far as an equivalence, but then you get two additional. One comes with the camera, and that's the 1.4 tele extender. It comes with the lens.
It comes with the lens.
Yes, it comes with the lens, and then the 2x tele extender you have to buy. So now you have an 800 millimeter lens, f5.6.
Wow.
And if that doesn't excite anybody,
I don't know what's wrong with you.
Shiv, I have a question for you, Shiv. Now,
yes.
I've used Nikon and Sony teleextenders.
Yes.
And in both cases, the 1.4s gave me good results, and the 2X did not, particularly in terms of autofocus. Does the 2X on this lens work reasonably well?
Well, let me get back to the way you asked that question. So you remember when Nikon had a 1.4, and then they had a 2, and the 2 was just horrible?
Yeah.
And then they came out with a 1.7.
Oh, I never used that.
Yeah, so they had a 1.7 to kind of make life a little bit better. As far as focusing is concerned, the ×2 tele extender is as fast or as good as the 1.4. On the real far end, so you're at 800, okay, you are actually going to see a little bit of a degradation, a very, very slight bit of a degradation. Now, I'm seeing that degradation not in focus, but in a little bit of fringing, and it's because I still have a prototype. So I want to qualify that. I don't have a production version of this lens. It's a prototype, or pre-production, if you want to call it. It's absolutely exceptional. And if you are a Lightroom user, that little bit of fringing,
you can knock
is a matter of just adjusting a slider and it's gone.
What's the
price
of that lens?
Focus performance, and as far as the quality of the image, it is exceptional.
What's the price, Shiv?
Close to $3,000.
Oh, that's not bad. And what's the equivalent lens on a full frame? Price wise,
an 800 millimeter on a full frame would run you about $15,000, $16,000 up to $20,000.
Oh, yeah, that's a little bit of change.
Am I right, Doug? I mean, that's not.
Yeah, I can't even think of. I've never shot an 800 millimeter lens on a full frame, so I don't know how much they cost. It's more than I can afford, that's for sure. And I've never reviewed one.
If you think about a 600 millimeter Canon or a 600 millimeter Nikon, you're talking about $15,000, right?
And they're monstrous lenses.
Yeah.
They're just
this.
Yeah.
Look.
I know you can put that in the palm of your hand almost, right?
Well, it's 7.5 inches.
Not bad.
I mean, I'm using my fingers to measure, but that's
Yeah. Hey, that goes in a camera bag. Whereas the full frame version would require its own camera bag, right? So by itself with nothing else in there. Crazy.
Yeah, as when we used to go hiking, we always took a mule with us just to carry the lenses.
A real one, a real mule.
A real one, yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. Not a guy named Mule, an actual mule.
An actual mule.
All right, cool. That's a perfect pick. We'll put all links to all these picks in the show notes for this episode. I have a quick one I want to do, and that's for, bring me up on the screen here. That is for this guy right here. So this is called the Gnar Box, and this is version 1.0 of the Gnar Box. And what it is basically it's a computer, essentially, and it is a computer that lets you work off of it wirelessly in the field from an app. So you see it's got SD card slots and micro SD slots on it. You can basically do a shoot, import your images to this hard drive so that you can clear off your main media if you want to, and then connect to this thing. Has a Wi-Fi chip in it, so you can connect to it wirelessly with the app and start your edits. And then, or video, you can start your video edits and start your project on the road from a mobile device. And then when you get back to a workstation, you can plug it in and import it and then continue working. So it'll create XML for for Premiere or Final Cut. And then obviously it'll save the metadata or the sidecar XMP or whatever for raw files that you edit in Lightroom, and then those will transfer over so that you can get a head start on the road if you're on the road editing. But the cool thing is these guys have just kicked off another Kickstarter for the Gnar Box. So there were a lot of problems, I think, with this version. One of them is it had no UI. It had no screen on it, or no way to kind of tell where your images were on it, or to get any sort of like warm fuzzy that when I transferred my images over here, they are actually on this drive. You wouldn't get that because there's no user.
No feedback.
No feedback on the device. You'd have to connect your phone to it, then you could look at the tree, but barring that, there's no feedback. The new one has a screen on it and an input mechanism so that you can get much more data. Plus, it does a whole bunch of other things. It's interesting. So they're running a Kickstarter right now. So if you go to Kickstarter.com, and we'll link to it, but if you go to Kickstarter and type in Gnar Box, GNARBOX, you'll see their Kickstarter page. There's a cool video there. If you want to buy it, I would suggest doing it now, but they had set a goal of $75,000. I think they're at $500,000 right now. So they're okay on the funding. I'm sure they could use more, but they're okay on the funding. But I just thought this was a novel idea for travel photographers or people that are on the road a lot, because it sort of removes the necessity for you to break out a computer and then do all this other stuff just to see the stuff that you just shot. You can just import it onto this thing and then whip out your iPad or tablet and then get working on it. And you can see them, full screen and keep going without just the normal flow of tethering wirelessly to your camera, copying the files over and editing there. You edit them right on the hard drive. It's like having an external hard drive for your mobile device. So I thought
what's the capacity on that, Frederick?
I want to say this one was 1 terabyte. I think the new ones are double that, are 2 terabytes. So
and they're SSD or
SSD. Yep. So solid state SSD, weather sealed. I don't know if you can see, let me hold that up. If you can see the case there, it's rubber. Now I feel like I can run this thing over with my car and it would be just fine. It is it's tough. It feels like
not with your images in it, right?
Well, I put your images in, not my images. So cool. So that's my pick of the week. Go check it out. I think you guys will find that interesting. I'll put links to all of our picks in the show notes for this episode. All right, guys, we're going to wrap things up now. We're at the end of the show. It's time to get our Q&A. There's a couple questions in here I want to blow through. You guys ready for these?
You bet.
Sure.
All right. So they are in the section 4 in our show notes if you guys want to follow along. The first one is from Mervyn McDougall. Mervyn says, there always seemed to be a new camera coming out with new bells and whistles, video, 4K, all kinds of focusing systems. But how do you know when you truly have outgrown a camera? Who wants to take that one? How do you know when you've outgrown a camera?
Go ahead, Shiv.
SHIV VERMA on the hot seat. Go for it.
It's not a question that I can really answer because we outgrow cameras all the time, and I think the whole program this evening is basically to help you grow out of cameras because there's going to be a new one.
Right.
So if you haven't grown out of it, it's time you did because there's something new in the horizon. And as Doug said, the camera that you bought yesterday.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, you got to stop chasing the horizon, I think.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
It's not. I think about, I don't. I'm sorry,
is,
Shiv. I don't think it's not about outgrowing the camera. I think people get that. They're like, how do I know when I've outgrown a camera? The camera has nothing to do with it, in my opinion. Yeah. It's like it begin with the end in mind. If you decide I need to shoot this kind of photography, then you have to buy the right tool. That's like asking a carpenter. You're apprenticing with a carpenter, and you're like, how do I know when I've outgrown my hammer? When it doesn't do the job that you are trying to do anymore. That's when.
Well, if the handle's broken, get a new handle.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't know if it's not working, then switch out. Screwdriver or whatever. So yeah, great. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Shiv. Do you have something to add to that?
No, I just feel that when you get a question like that, I think the person really is looking for what's the next camera should I buy?
Yeah.
And the next camera that you should buy is the camera that will do what you want to do today. Because if your camera is already doing it, you don't need to buy another camera.
Yeah.
But if there's something the camera is lacking, then of course, yes, go buy another one. Otherwise, I just want to go back to when I started. I mean, when I started photography, I had one camera. And I still have it. But did I change cameras every year? No. Every 2 years? No. Every 10 years? No.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had a 35 millimeter film camera, and I had two lenses, a 50 millimeter lens and a 35 millimeter lens. And I did everything with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah,
so
Rommel Velasco in the chat says he thinks gear acquisition syndrome is part of the fun in photography. I would agree. It depends on who you are. Like, it's part of the fun, and for some people, it's kind of like an addiction to an opioid or something, right? Because you get some sort of rush when that box shows up, and you want that rush again. So, all right. So Trevor has a question, or I'm sorry, Rommel has a question. Doug, you touched on this before, but let's hit it again. Rommel Velasco says, how many megapixels do you really need? I think hit that.
It depends.
It depends. Everything depends for this show, right?
I mean, if you look at the Panasonic cameras, for example, one of the features we didn't have a chance to talk about is their ability to shoot 4K video for the purpose of ending up with still images. Mm-hmm. 4K video is only an 8 megapixel image.
And 6K.
6K, yeah, 6K, which gives you how many megapixels in your stills?
18.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's perfectly good for almost everything, unless you're going to print large, unless you're going to crop. If you're putting stuff on social media or you're doing 8x10 prints or 11x17 prints or something like that, 11x14, you're fine. Just the megapixel thing has gotten a little out of hand. I have my you mentioned the Sony A7S. It's a 12 megapixel camera. It's terrific. So don't get hung up on megapixels.
You need exactly how many megapixels you need and not one single megapixel.
That's
more.
Right. Right. In fact, if I can preempt, I want to answer Rommel Velasco's question about Micro Four Thirds. Can I answer that one?
Yeah, go for it. It's all yours.
Okay. He says, when will Micro Four Thirds continue to innovate past the 20 megapixel sensor?
Right.
Now, as Shiv said, that sensor is 1/4 the area of a full frame sensor. So in terms of the pixel density, you've got the equivalent of an 80 megapixel full frame sensor when it comes to the density of the pixels, the size of the pixels, and the space between them. What you're starting to hit up against is the limit of diffraction. And as you go to having a denser sensor, smaller pixels that are closer together, of course, you're going to lose the ability to shoot in low light to some extent, but you're also going to get to the point where you're starting to get images that are getting softer and softer as they get larger because of diffraction. It's, as you've said in the past, Frederick, it's, what is it? It's physics. What do you used to say?
I don't know. I used to say a lot of stuff.
You used to say a phrase about it, you know, it's physics. And
physics. Yeah.
So, you know, at some point, you know, 20 megapixels, could they do a 24 megapixel Micro Four Thirds? Sure, they could. But now you're looking at, what is that? A 96 megapixel equivalent full frame in terms of pixel density. And that's at the point where the diffraction is starting to get so severe that, you know, unless you're shooting wide open all the time, you're going to get into trouble.
Yeah. But there is potentially, I mean, if ever, the foveon sensor became something that was no longer patented for only one use, then yes, you could layer a sensor and then get over the 20 megapixel. But apart from that, I doubt that physics, as Frederick would say, would allow you to go more than 20 megapixels. I mean, that 20 megapixels in that area is huge.
Yeah. I haven't hit the wall, the ceiling of needing or wanting more megapixels. But I think part of that is Stockholm syndrome, and the other part is I'm not doing the type of work that requires me to need that many megapixels. Like, we do this Watch Me Work show where we basically screen share with a photographer as they go through their workflow or post-processing routine or whatever. And Troy Miller was on. He's a wedding photographer. He was on a couple of weeks ago, and he was showing part of his workflow is aggressively cropping in because he has the pixels to do it. You know, lose your resolution, but, you know, it's like he's straightening and cropping and zooming in and taking pieces out and all that stuff. A lot of what he was doing would not be possible with the systems that I shoot. So, to the degree that he's doing it. So, you know, it matters. I mean, it matters depending on the genre or the type of shooting you're doing. Right. If you're shooting, I think if you're doing very deliberate photography and you know exactly what's going to be in the frame and what you're cropping in the camera, then, you know, it kind of obviates the need to crop and post, or to have the flexibility to crop and post.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I think if you have 8 to 10 megapixels of usable information, good usable information, and you really need to extend that beyond your 8 by 10 or 16 by 20 images, you can, if you know how to do it properly, use software and resize your image. I mean, the On1 product, Perfect Resize, does a wonderful job. And I have actually taken an 8 megapixel file and blown it up to 7 feet by 5 feet and not had any severe degradation.
Wow. Yeah, it depends on viewing distance as well, right? Because we all see those shot on iPhone billboards, right? That look fantastic as you're driving by. But I would imagine if you go stand next to it, you'll see, golf ball sized pixels or grain in there. But it doesn't matter because they're not designed to be viewed at.
I have an example of that very situation, that 8 megapixel file being blown up. It's on my blog. And if people want to go have a look, they can. And I've actually cropped into one eye of the model just to show the detail. And, even the blood vessels, you can see them clearly. So
where is it on your blog? I have your blog up right now, Shiv.
If you go to the search section on the blog on top and just put LX100.
Maybe I'm on the wrong blog. I'm on shivverma.com.
shivverma.com, the blog.
Yeah, I don't see a search in here though. Okay, all right. Well, find it and send me the link to it, and I'll pull it up. All right, let's get to the next question. This is from Trevor. He says, "What's the panel's viewpoint on Leica's new philosophy of stripping away labeled buttons and dials, leaving them blank so people can create their own interface?" Doug, you want to take this? You have a Leica. Do you shoot Leica at all?
Well, I'm old Leica, not new Leica. Doug's new Leica.
I'm old and new. Here's my old M6. And by the way, this is a camera, an M6 that I've never needed a new sensor because I just changed film. Back in these days, we didn't have gear acquisition syndrome. We had film acquisition syndrome. So
Yes.
the big difference was somebody would come up with a new film and we would get all excited and say, we got to try this new film. So that's
and
what
you'd have an area in the refrigerator dedicated to you, right? For your film?
No, I now have my own refrigerator.
Your
my
own
wife,
refrigerator.
I bought a second refrigerator just to store film, and it's full.
Nice.
It's only 3.5 cubic feet. It's not a full size fridge, but it is packed with film. The answer to the question, personally, I go the other extreme. I like dedicated dials, like you get on old cameras and the Fuji line in particular, and the Leica Q, where I have, and you can see it here, but I have, aperture ring on the lens. I have a shutter speed dial. I prefer dedicated controls myself. Leica's new cameras, the SL and things like that, they're going to, soft buttons and things. Even my M10, I have an M10, and that's got relatively soft buttons. I prefer the hard ones myself.
Nice.
Yeah, but if you look at most of the mirrorless cameras, and now to some extent even the DSLRs, where you have all the buttons, the function buttons that are customizable, they're labeled. I mean, they're labeled F1, F2, F3, but you can make them do anything you want. So the question is, label or no label. If you know where the button is and what you programmed it for, and you can remember it, you're okay.
I'll tell you what bothers me. Like, here's a Sony A9. Okay. In aperture priority, the rear dial controls the aperture. In shutter priority, the rear dial controls the shutter. And it drives me crazy. In manual, which is which? In manual, one of them does the shutter, one of them does the aperture. I can never remember which. So it's sort of trial and error every time I pick up the camera. So that drives me crazy.
Yeah. All right, on to the next one. This one's from Chris Berry, our community manager. He says, in the $500 to $2,000 range, which brands offer the best values when considering your perfect camera or camera system?
G9.
I'm gonna go G9. I'm just gonna say.
Wait a minute. What did he say on price range?
$500 to $2,000.
$2,000. There's no Sony camera that can fit in there, right?
I don't know, Doug.
Oh, the 2000. Oh, he said 2000. That's right. Yeah, the A7 Mark III is $2,000.
Yeah, and he just bought that and got it today.
Or the A6500. The A6500 is less. I'll tell you though, if you want the world's best bargain for street photography, get a Ricoh GR2. It's about $500, and it's a great camera.
What is that?
The Ricoh GR2.
Oh,
nice.
Terrific camera for street photography.
Is that a new camera?
$500 or so.
Is it new?
No, it's old. It's been out for 3 or 4 years.
Okay. Nice. Very cool. All right, guys. So we're burning through these. We're almost through the show. The next question is from Rommel Vlasco. He says, is there a future for DSLR bodies?
No.
I'm trying not to laugh.
Just no.
I don't think so.
Next question.
I don't think so. Is there a future for the horse and buggy? Will they find a niche?
Well, they're actually for DSLR. I'm going to Hong Kong. One of the things I'm doing on the Hong Kong trip is buy an old film Hasselblad and 3 lenses, and got a big mirror. It's an SLR. SLR without the D.
Whenever I hear people that say they're excited about shooting film, Doug, like you, I always think of that. What was that? What was that movie? I can't remember it. With Tom Hanks was in it. It's an old movie, and there was a scene with a priest in there flogging himself.
I don't know the movie, but I can imagine the scene.
That's what I think when I think of people that are like shooting film, having shot film, under duress for several years and processed it and printed it and delivering to the customer and all that stuff. I don't know that I'd romanticize it to want to go back to those.
You and I need to go out and shoot. I'll bring one of my speed graphics and we'll shoot 4x5.
Yeah, then we got to wait a couple days to see it.
Well, that's right. But you know what? When you shoot film and you get home, you have nothing really to do because you can't quickly put them into Lightroom and look at them. You got to let them stew for a couple of days.
Yeah, we've had this conversation because what you do, you say you let them stew for a couple of days. You're not processing and printing. You're shooting film and then sending it off to have it scanned, right?
I do my own processing and scanning.
Oh, you're doing that now? Okay.
I am, absolutely.
Nice. Okay, all right. I'll give you. So
I
you're a purist.
I have a gigantic darkroom. My wife insists on calling it the kitchen.
And you blocked out the windows in there?
Well, no, because I'm not printing. I'm just doing, developing.
You're doing, you got the.
I got all the chemicals, and I got the tent for changing the film and all that stuff.
Look at you. All right. You're not playing around. No. All right. Well, cool. So we all agree. Rommel, sorry about that.
Well,
there is no future.
Well, wait, no, we didn't get Shiv's answer.
Shiv said no. Is there?
Oh, he
no
did.
Future?
Okay.
No, absolute no.
No future for DSLR.
No future.
Lens. All right. Through the Mind says, what's the most reliable camera brand? That's tough.
Man.
These loaded questions from these people, man. God, the chat room is on fire. The most reliable, I have no idea. I mean, I would say the one that you have with you and that you take care of. I shot Nikon for the better part of 2 decades and or more, actually, and it was flawless. I mean, I've dropped a Nikon body. It was a Nikon F3. Maybe an F4, out of a helicopter that was hovering on Vandenberg Air Force Base, that was hovering just above some eucalyptus trees, because those are all over the place down there, just above some eucalyptus trees. Something happened, and I dropped the camera. I think I was trying to change film or something. Dropped the camera. That was a D4. Dropped it out. The lens popped off, and the film came out. So the battery, not the film, but the battery compartment opened, but the camera was fine. I put another lens on it and it kept going. That could have been a Nikon commercial where, you drop a camera out of a helicopter. But none of the cameras that I've owned, I've gotten trapped in rainstorms in Vietnam with my GH4 at the time, and literally torrential downpour in the middle of a rice paddy, and came out shooting on the other side. So I think cameras today, if you buy a semi-pro or a professional level camera, for the most part, reliability isn't necessarily a factor unless you're walking around like a troglodyte, dragging your camera behind you everywhere you go. I don't think you're going to have a problem. You guys, what do you guys think?
Shiv, go ahead.
Well,
don't be scared. Doug, you're going to have to chime in because you're
I'll take my turn. Go ahead.
Okay. Go first.
So, I've had cameras. I don't want to date myself, but let's put it this way. I've had cameras and cameras and cameras and cameras. I've never sent a camera in to be repaired.
There you go.
I've had Canons, I've had Sonys, I've had Panasonics, I've had Ricos, I have Konica, Leica, Hasselblad, Rolleiflex. I've never sent a camera in to be repaired. So they're all reliable.
Yeah. I would come to that same conclusion. From the sample size of one, the camera. I haven't had that many cameras, but the cameras that I have, I've got a bunch of cameras that I've been going through that I need to put online. In fact, I put them in our little community for sale. All this different stuff, and everything is in perfect condition because I take care of everything. I feel like it's a tool. It's a precision electronic instrument. I don't know. Doug, cameralabs.com. You guys have gone through a lot of cameras over there. There's got to be some negatives in the bunch over there.
Well, I can't say what Shiv said because I have had to send a number of cameras in for repair over my lifetime. And we just said that, is there a future for DSLR bodies? And we said no. But the only camera I ever regret having sold was the Nikon D700. Because that camera was like you described, Frederick. That Nikon D700 was a brick. Mm-hmm. You could do anything to that camera and it wouldn't go wrong. I got to say that a lot of the new cameras with a lot of electronics, they can be a little finicky. I've had cameras that have gotten wet and have become intermittent. I haven't had to send them in for repairs, but they've had, little things not quite right about them. And the one thing to say about the big Nikons and Canons, like the D3S, the D4S, the 1DX, these cameras are really tough. They are really, really tough and they can take a lot. So if you really want reliability, if you're going to abuse your cameras, then there isn't anything in the Sony, Olympus, Panasonic, or Fuji line that's really as tough as those big ass Nikons and Canons.
Yeah. Yep. I think that should be a brand name. Big
ass
Nikon.
Big ass.
BigAssDSLR.com. Go ahead and register that. I think that'll work for a little while. Okay, next question is Ruth Happel. She says, what one feature would make you buy a new camera? Is there something you would want that no other camera has now?
Yeah. I want a camera that after the fact goes back and gets the shot that I missed.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Oh, Panasonic can
Oh,
do
Panasonic, yeah, Panasonic can do it. That's
Oh,
right.
that's right.
Shiv,
right.
explain that. Explain that. It's marvelous.
Okay, so it's really an amazing thing that, you know, it's basically utilizing the video capability of the camera. That's where it all originally started. So basically what's happening is that when you hold the camera up and you've got your finger on the shutter, and now you press the shutter, it takes a series of images. But in this particular case, what it's done is it's also been buffering a series of images before you press the shutter. So, you know, what we call about Henri Cartier-Bresson's the decisive moment is if you see the decisive moment, you never photographed it. But here, the camera has in fact taken the image for you prior to your pressing the shutter. So that feature, which was originally just in 4K and 6K video mode, is now available in RAW mode also. So you can actually shoot pre-burst RAW and post-burst RAW, but you're limited to a series of only 50 images.
Oh, only? Oh.
Yeah.
Pretty deal breaker. Come on, Panasonic.
Hopefully that's enough, right?
Come on. You know, you need to get your dark matter group together to fold space and time better. That's perfect. Great. Yeah, another thing to play with tonight on this thing. Through the Mind says, Through the Mind says, new cameras are coming out every 6 months, it seems. Do you guys think this is contributing to the reduction in quality control, or is it just me? I haven't seen any reduction in quality control. Have you guys? I mean, this is kind of related to the other question.
No, I haven't. I haven't seen any problems.
Good. Perfect.
It's just you.
It's just, sorry.
That was his question. Is it just me? It's just you.
It's just you. It's just you. But then again, we haven't tried we don't even know what camera system you're using. So,
right.
Nathan Pratt says, is the full frame versus crop sensor really a big debate anymore?
Yes.
Perfect. We got a crop sensor and a full frame person on the show. Doug says yes. Why?
No, they're both great. I think we've proven the advantage of a crop sensor. Just hold up that lens again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Compare that to the equivalent on a full frame. I mean, you know, that's an obvious advantage of a crop sensor. Full frame, again, it's the ability to shoot shallow depth of field when you're shooting wide open, because the field of view of the two cameras is different. So you make up for it with aperture, blah, blah, blah. So yes, there's still a difference. However, let's go back. This question we had, what's the best camera? Earlier on, we talked about that. For the vast majority of photographs that anybody makes, it won't matter.
Right. Yeah, right. Yep. That's the takeaway right there. That's the perfect takeaway.
Yeah.
All right. Through the Mind. Okay, no, we got that one. Nathan Pratt says, is the full frame? Oh, no, we got that one already. Okay, so the last one is Ruth Happel. Ruth says, I went digital very early on. Will denoise software ever make those 2 megapixel images look great? Will denoise software ever make those 2 megapixels look great from back in the day? I don't know. Doug, what do you think? Is there software you can throw at it?
No. Same answer. There's no. Just print them on little postage stamps. You'll be perfectly happy.
Yeah.
I mean, no. I mean, there's noise reduction software is always getting better, but there's certainly limits to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Physics.
All right.
There's 1 and 2 megapixel cameras were good when they were there, and that was it. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
All right,
well, guys, we're at the end of another episode of TWiP. This is the end of episode 514. Thanks for both of your time for coming on the show. It's been great and good to catch up with both of you. Shiv, where can people go? We'll put your links in the blog post for this episode, but where would you like to direct people to?
Most everything can be, from my website, www.shivverma.com. Just remember there are 2 V's. My first name ends with a V and my last name begins with a V, and it does not become a W.
Oh, yeah, interesting. You've had some issues with that, it sounds like.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Hey, don't worry. Most people can't spell Frederick, so I would expect them to butcher your name. Thanks for coming on, Shiv. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's been wonderful.
Anytime. Doug K, man, what about you? Where would you like to direct people to go?
Well, after trashing Facebook, I won't tell them to find me on Facebook, but you can go to dougk.com, and I have an E on the end of K, and it's woefully out of date, but you might want to look at my Cuba workshops, because in the next few months, I do hope to start those up again and taking people to Cuba for terrific photography and music, cigars, and rum.
Excellent. I like
and food.
And food. Well, yeah, Cuban food. I don't know.
And cool cars. The cars are fantastic.
Lots of cars.
Yeah, cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks to both of you guys. Listeners and watchers, next week on TWiP, Photo Joseph and Michael Greco are going to be on the hot seat. They're going to join us to talk about ways to bring your photography to the next level. And remember to stay up to date on all things photography. Just subscribe to the podcast over at thisweekinphoto.com/subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell so that you know when we release new episodes. All right, guys, it is time to take that lens cap off. This is TWiP.